Good afternoon. I'm Eric Lanask, and I'm very happy to be able to welcome you all to our webinar today. Today's session is called How Today's Customer Success Teams Drive Growth. The relationship between businesses and their customers has changed. It's so much more complex, and there are so many more potential touch points between businesses and customers. It's all driven by technology and the trends and advances that have been made as a result of those technological advances. Talking about mobile, social, digital, all creating all those different opportunities to connect and to exert influence and build, or if not done correctly, damage customer relationships. The fact is that customer success, customer relationships, and the teams that are involved in those aspects, it's not simply about combining the pluses and the minuses from acquisition and attrition. Customer service, customer success teams that have traditionally been looked at as loss leaders within organizations, they've been transformed into teams that are now part of the actual revenue chain. There are new strategies, new accountabilities, new roles, new job functions, and new tools that are all part of this customer success 2.0 world, where customer success teams are really becoming drivers of growth. So with that said, I am joined today by an absolutely fantastic panel that's ready to talk about this CS 2.0 idea and to share their insights and experiences around how they've seen customer success teams evolve in this new digital world and how that evolution is driving growth opportunities. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to take just 20 or 30 seconds to say hello and tell us what your role is within the customer success environment as I introduce you. We have Leah Cheney, who's the Vice President of Customer Success at Ask Nicely.
Hey everybody, this is Leah Cheney, VP of Customer Success and Advocacy with Ask Nicely. Super excited to be joining this amazing panel today and going over, customer success, finally getting that great seat at the revenue table.
Thanks, Leah. And we've got Annie Wu, who is a Senior VP of Consumer Service at MindBody. Annie?
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. My role at MindBody is SVP of Consumer Services, so any MindBody app users out there, I'm one of the people behind the scenes with that experience. However, prior to that, I built out customer services at MindBody. I did that for 12 years, including building our customer success team, so I have a lot to say on this topic.
Thank you, Annie. And last but certainly not least, we have Aaron Thompson, who is a partner at Success Hacker.
Hi, Eric. Thanks for having me today. And Leah and Annie, I'm pleased to get to speak with you both today as well. I am a partner at Success Hacker. We are a services-based consultancy that covers customer success coaching and training. Before that, I founded Portland Customer Success, a consultancy here in the Northwest, and I headed up as the head of customer success at an early stage SaaS company prior to that. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you to all of you and welcome, and thanks again for spending some time with us to talk about your experiences. Now, before we move on, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. First, you do all have an interface on your screens, and I encourage you all to use that interface to submit any questions you have about today's session to us. We have a Q&A session built into our time at the end of the session, and any additional questions, and I know that the team at Ask Nicely will follow up offline following the event as well. And if you come up with any additional questions, you'd like some more information, contact information, as well as details on the on-demand version of today's event will be in each of your inboxes tomorrow. So with that being said, let's take a look at our program today. We're going to start off by looking kind of at the current status, where we are, what's the current state of customer success teams, and how they're expected to contribute to revenue models today. We're going to get into some best practices, some strategies and tactics and KPIs that truly exceptional businesses are embracing that are enabling them to turn turn to their Customer 2.0 strategies. And of course, we know that there are always challenges in making these kinds of transitions. We're going to get into some of the ways that your businesses can help overcome those and make your customer success project a massive success. And thanks to our panelists today, we're going to get some fantastic, useful, actionable insight from frontline customers who've lived through these scenarios, information that you'll be able to take back to your businesses and hopefully use it to drive your own success levels to brand new heights. So let's start by taking a look at some of these new expectations that are being set for customer success teams. I mentioned earlier on that it's not focused purely on retention anymore. Of course, retention or churn reduction is a key component still. To be fair, it's hard to claim success if you're not able to retain your customers. But we're also talking about really setting new revenue objectives, starting with expanding the success you're having with existing customers. We're talking about things like upselling, cross-selling, making sure they're aware of any other products or entirely different product lines or brands that you're part of. Of course, there's a direct revenue component that's attached, but the more that you're able to expand those existing customers and your relationships with them and build them into additional spend, the more you're also going to be doing to build brand loyalty from them. We've got a couple of other topics there regarding these new expectations to build out on. But before we get to that, we'd love to know, what is the number one objective of your customer success team at your organization? You're looking to reduce churn, increase product usage, increase renewals, is it expansion, or advocacy? Now, while you all take just a moment to answer that question for us, and on behalf of everybody on today's panel, thank you for helping make this an even more interactive experience for all of us. The third expectation, and one that's on this poll question as well, is advocacy. Digital publishing, social media, this whole new digital world has created an environment where companies are looking seriously at advocacy. Why? To me, it's an extension of that traditional word of mouth element. Brand advocates are able to leverage those digital channels where your customers and prospects, and in some cases maybe even your employees, are already engaged with each other in trusted environments. To me, it really represents a formalization of something that's been happening forever. Digital channels really just make it possible and much more convenient for companies to track and to react to those sentiments much more effectively. I'm going to give our audience just another second or two to get some of those answers in, but would love to take a look and see what our audience is telling us so far. And hopefully everybody can see these results out there. We're fairly evenly distributed between reducing churn, increasing product usage, and expansion with a fair amount, almost 20% looking at advocacy of the key objective of their customer success teams. Leah, let me jump over to you for a second. Based on what you've seen at Ask Nicely, are you surprised by these results, or are they pretty much what you might have expected?
I am kind of surprised, but also I think it fits with the rhythm of what I've been seeing. Leading customer success teams, it's so interesting to see increased renewals at 3.8%. Rewind back a couple of years, and I feel like that would have been your number one metric there. But that's just one person's perspective, so definitely want to hear everybody else. But I'm not surprised to see expansion starting to take a little bit of, the lead. It looks like it's tied with product usage, which is actually music to my ears because, it really should go hand in hand. So that's cool to see. Aaron, what do you think? I'm curious.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Leah, I was actually thinking the exact same thing. I think these results speak to why we're here today. As a consultant out in the industry, I'm afforded a unique perspective because I'm not my daily job is just knowing customer success, the domain. I don't have, other than my own customers and my own clients, I don't have, hundreds of companies that I'm working with, or, like Ask Nicely, for example. So that affords me time to kind of go and talk to leaders and hear sort of what the word on the street is. And this presentation in this webinar today couldn't be more aptly timed. Coming out of Pulse, the discussion was very, having this seat at the revenue table. When are we going to stop thinking of customer success as the back of the house and start aligning marketing plus sales plus CS for a holistic customer experience? And I think that's what we're seeing here. It's sort of the maturation of customer success as a whole. We're no longer focused on renewals as our core competency. I mean, that's obviously blocking and tackling and, completely critical. You can't grow if you can't keep your customers. But we're now focusing more on expansion, advocacy, and those types of things. So I think that it speaks to all of us as leaders and practitioners in the customer success domain that, number one, we're talking about, being at this revenue table and driving businesses from the customer outward as opposed to the other way around. And I think that this is a great example of that. It's kind of a microcosm that, we're not, we of course are focused on increasing renewals. We have to be. But in addition to that, and actually more, I think, importantly, is driving additional product usage, expansion, et cetera, as we see here. So I think it's great. I think that it's, like I said, perfectly timed.
That's cool. That's great. Annie, I'm really curious to yours as well.
Yeah, thanks. One of my favorite quotes is from J.B. Wood, CEO of TSIA, and he says, customer success is a service motion with a sales result. And it's something that we've learned is organized as services, and that can be monetized to drive expansion revenue for the organization. At the same time, I think a lot of us started our customer success journey. I know ours started a couple years ago, and it was this churn fighter approach. That was our strongest motivation. So I'm really excited to see this shift in that understanding a strong retention engine in your organization creates those opportunities for expansion. Also looking at this increased product usage, that is a way to get to that expansion and a way to reduce the churn. So I love seeing the shift in this data here. I think a couple of years ago, we would have seen that reduced churn as the top reason.
Well, thanks, everybody. So speaking of looking at a little bit older data, but frankly, this is data from a Regalix research study from early this year, so half a year ago, where you do see reducing churn and increasing product usage at the top, but you also see increase in renewals at near those same levels as far as what organizations that do have a clearly defined customer success strategy are looking at. So, Leah, this really, I guess, points to the fact that things are changing, that people are acknowledging, recognizing that while renewal obviously still has to be an objective, there are other elements that help increase revenues.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's this old saying which my friends on this panel will probably know very well, which is the hunter versus the farmer, right? And that was something that used to be brought up a lot. It's added to kind of the resistance for some organizations or even CS leaders taking on the more expansion and revenue focus of a team. But what I've found, and it looks like 72% of organizations agree, is that it's not all about hunting down cash, if you will. It's about growing your crops, and it's using that same farmer analogy. It's also about increasing the success that's there. So the main thing I think that's powerful in this is that more and more organizations in customer success are realizing that there is a win-win here in helping grow customers, and to do that, it can't just be quota-based, let's go get this number. It needs to be, hey, let's increase the product. Let's look at the renewal. Let's make sure that they're set up for success. Let's make sure they know about the product roadmap. Let's make sure they're an advocacy, they're an advocate for us rather, but we're also one, for them, that our product allows them to get advocates. And so I think that this is all a part of what was already there, the foundation of customer success. It's just becoming, like we saw marketing do, 10, 15 years ago in the software industry, become more revenue focused without losing the customer being front and center. I think what is surprising about, the stats here, which are from media posts, by the way, February 2018, in case anyone wants to know the stats, where they came from, but that 28% don't have this strategy in place. I'm actually not surprised by that, because I think, again, when you have this shift in focus from, hey, let's just make the customer happy, to, hey, we actually should be more strategic and have goals and key performance indicators, et cetera, we still have a good group of organizations that are catching up to the flow there. But that's my side, or my take on it. I'd love to pass it over to Annie, who also has a tremendous amount of experience in this area.
Yeah, so, again, for us, our customer success implementation really started because of churn. One of the things that I did to create the buy-in that enabled us to really refine and develop this strategy was to sit down with our finance team and create basically a revenue waterfall. So for people who haven't seen this analysis, it's you take your starting average recurring revenue and you subtract out your churn or your downgrades, and what you have left is retention revenue. And from there, you can then add back in your upsells or any cross-sells you have, and you have your end-of-year dollar-based net expansion. I think is what they like to call it in the investor world. But creating that revenue lens on the organization and showing where the problems were and where we were losing revenue enabled us to really get the buy-in to say we need customer success. And not only do we need it, but the organization needs us, customer service, customer success, more than we need them. It sounds a little bit cocky, but it's true. We have these mountains of data that we're sitting on, and we can leverage this and shape it to the audiences that are making these decisions and say, here's what we can do. We can actually turn this around. We can improve our revenue retention and start learning to talk like that. I think is a great way to create buy-in and really get the organization aligned around the customer success strategy and define it more clearly.
If this was a video, you'd see me shaking my head with you, yes, throughout the whole thing. I think that is so well stated. Aaron, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was actually curious if either you, Leah, or Annie have ever seen that graph that you overlay net new revenue and retention revenue from the inception of a company, and obviously net new is essentially linear, where it's just continually climbing up, and it's surpassing, retention revenue at the beginning. But then there's this critical point where the retention revenue almost starts looking like a Bitcoin, tracking, value tracking, where it just starts going through the roof, and you can obviously play with the numbers of your retention rates, et cetera. But I think that, to Annie's point of like the ROI justification of putting in a strategic customer success plan is that as your company matures, the vast majority of the revenue that you use to keep the lights on is going to come from your existing customers. And then obviously if you can throw in some expansion and stuff on that as well, that's even, icing on the cake. But have either of you ever seen that graph? I saw it at Pulse again this year, or it might have been at Tatango's conference. But I mean, it's fascinating to me. My little brain, I need things to be binary. And if you can break it down to such a vivid display of exponential growth versus linear growth, the ROI discussion gets much easier, I believe.
Yeah, Aaron, that's such a great point. And when we dug into this analysis, we found that a majority of our revenue came from existing customers and our ability to retain and expand upon that revenue versus the new sales that were coming in. I wish I'd seen that graph. Yeah. I would love to see it. I
gotta pull that up somewhere. It's got to be on a slide deck from the conference. But Exactly. I mean, it's only a matter of time before you get that critical mass of customers, and now that's the tail wagging the dog, if you will. Leah, what are your thoughts? Have you seen that?
Yeah, no, I'd love for you to share that with me. I feel like I have seen it, but it definitely, I mean, you spoke to it where I visualize it, and I couldn't agree more.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. I'd love to take a little deeper look at each of these, some of these different expectations that are hitting customer success teams. Talk a little bit about some of the drivers, some of the reasons behind them, and such. So, if we start talking about churn, after all, you've all mentioned it: churn, retention. They're obviously intimately related. A number of different reasons for customers leaving. Number of different reasons for customers staying. And obviously, cost is always one that comes to mind, but there are so many there are several others: product fit, onboarding, time to value, stickiness is a term that's often used, and experience or ROI for the customer that are elements that customer success teams and organizations in general can have a much greater impact over, that they actually can affect much more than necessarily a price factor. Leah, what are your thoughts on that, on how some of these different drivers are impacting customer success teams?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, churn is that thing where for most customer success leaders, it accelerates your heart rate a little bit, even saying the word, right? I feel like this slide made me nervous. But it has changed over time, and I think that one of the big things here, and Annie spoke to this earlier, that we have to our advantage now is data, right? And so it's really getting ahead of this customer sentiment tracking and understanding of the customer. And really the paradigm shift that I've seen that's so powerful is going from this mentality of the customer, if the customer is happy, they will stay with us, to, happy customers churn, and really understanding that it's more about being happy. It's more about making your product and their experience a must-have versus this nice-to-have. And, that's where your agents in the field, if you will, your customer success managers, building a strong relationship, asking the right questions to what is success to each individual customer versus, hey, here's a template and every customer, this is what we think makes a customer successful, has really helped. So, yeah, it goes back to data and, tools that are available, et cetera, on that one. Annie, what do you think?
I'm going to jump in on that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Annie.
No, go for it. I love it.
I was just going to say, as part of the level 1 certification that we offer at Success Hacker, one of the modules is how to take a consultative approach. And I think that's what you're speaking to there, Leah, is if you're leveraging your product and services to help your customer's business grow, i.e., whatever that customer desired outcome looks like, generally it's to make more revenue or to generate more revenue, then now you are you're a consultant for them. You're an advocate helping them grow their business. So you need to know their market space. You need to know their competitors. You need to know how they do business, and you really need to be providing value every time you reach out and touch that customer, because if you're helping them grow their business, you don't have to worry about churn. You're now a partner. You're not a vendor. You've been brought in under a partner relationship to help them and actually help their customers even grow their business through their products and services. So it's that shift in thinking from a vendor selling something to a partner consulting to help the success on both sides. And once you can get to that level, churn, I think, and it goes back to that original slide with the stats, just reducing churn, it's no longer front of mind because it's a byproduct of what you're doing elsewhere. Annie, what are your thoughts? Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in.
No worries. Yeah, I agree. Reducing churn is important, but it is sort of this lagging indicator of doing the right things. A quick story about our organization. When we implemented customer success, doing so caused us to look at the data of all segments of customers. And through that, we started noticing that, wow, there are some customers who stay with us, that spend more money with us, and we weren't putting a lot of effort into creating that. It was just sort of organic by luck, I guess. But that look caused us to say, well, who are our customers? Because sales can sell the pants off anything, right? You've got a good sales team, a strong sales engine, they can go out and sell your product to almost anyone. But what we found is that there are actually customers that we want and there's customers we don't want. So by looking at that data, customer success was able to drive the organization to help identify who is our target audience. And it's gone through several iterations, but it's all supported by data. And it's recognizing that we are not a fit for everyone. So part of this reducing of churn, that first bullet point is, who are your customers? Who do you want them to be? The second thing that really opened our eyes was this concept of time to value. And this was putting our ego in check really as an organization. A lot of websites you go to that are selling products and services, they start with their story. They start with their product and their features, and they're comparing them to their competitors. But not a lot of people are saying, well, what outcomes can we drive for you business? What can we do to actually deliver the results that you're looking for? And this is, on our B2B side. And so shifting that messaging and shifting our onboarding experience to talk first about the customer's journey and their desired outcomes and back in to that feature and connect the features that we offered to the outcomes for their business was a huge shift for us, and one that we're still refining and working through. So if anyone's looking at the slide and thinking, what can we do? If you're in customer success or looking to do this, drive your organization to find a target customer and drive them to start thinking about outcome messaging in sales and marketing and definitely in your onboarding experience.
I love that. And then just to throw a little more data and stats on it, 13 cents for every dollar of retention revenue compared to $1.18 for net new revenue from a marketing and customer acquisition cost perspective. That just sort of helps bolster that solution messaging that you're talking about, Annie. I love that.
Great, thank you. So obviously, the next logical question is, so how do you avoid churn? What are some of the things that you can do in order to get around and accomplish some of those goals that you've all just talked about? And Aaron, you touched on the constantly adding value a little bit a moment ago. Annie, you just talked a little bit about the customer journey. So Leah, what other things can you do to win?
Yeah, I think, the big one for me is to monitor the feedback and make sure you're closing the loop, right? And so, it's constantly, without taking the customer's time, right? That's the great thing about, things like NPS and other tools where you can engage on your customer's sentiment in the moment. But it's more than just collecting how someone feels in the moment. It's about, closing that feedback loop, making sure that you're listening to things that they're asking for, whether it's product features, et cetera. And then I think, the real sweet spot is making sure that you're constantly adding value. So I'm always challenging my team. How can we constantly add value to our customers without constantly taking up their time? And so we've really worked hard to make product updates and releases and check-ins very scalable and not invasive on the customer's time. And then having a business review type overview, which is more comprehensive, at a 90-day check-in, just to really sit down and understand that, look, just like your business is probably evergreen and changing, so is your customers. So taking that moment to sit down and ask the right questions, get their information back on how their business has changed, even organizationally, right? Like maybe someone's left, maybe things have taken a different turn, and this new leader that they have to report to on their side has different expectations of your product. So, churn isn't as big of a risk when you completely are integrated into the DNA of your customers. But I think the key there is being really in key without being invasive.
Absolutely. And then I would just elaborate on that a little bit, Leah. And you touched on it around maybe a new leader coming in, that whoever's signing the check isn't generally the person that we're working with on a tactical kind of day-to-day level as a customer success manager. But it's still our job to establish that relationship and be really diligent about executive business reviews and demonstrating the value that we're providing. Equally as important as actually delivering the value is demonstrating it, because we can be doing all this great stuff with our cohort over there at our customer, and we think we're doing a fantastic job. Then their boss leaves, the new boss comes in, says, what are we paying these guys for? Why do we write this check? We have to demonstrate that value to that executive as well, and that's providing value. So how you provide value when you touch a customer is very different depending on where in the organization you are currently engaging, and your cadence and what you're doing and everything as well. So being real conscious about that and cognizant, I think, is critical too.
Yeah, I agree. And that adding value, just to reiterate what Aaron was saying, you have to communicate it. It can't just be this thing where, hey, we're adding value. These are great features. We're driving outcomes for our customers. If you don't tell your customers how you're driving outcomes for them, how you're driving results, and connect that value over and over and over to your product, you're going to lose them. They'll forget, oh yeah, MindBody does do a lot for me. We've heard that. You have to remind people of that. And of course, being personal, engaging, and monitoring feedback and closing the loop, so important. Just letting them know that you're listening and you have a focus on improving things for them.
Wonderful. So, we've talked about churn, and obviously reducing churn is a way of protecting existing current revenue streams. The next topic that I'd love to get into is, expanding those relationships, getting more out of your existing customers, obviously in the interest of increasing revenue, finding new ways to grow and to build financial success for the company. Great customer experience obviously is always going to be advantageous, and several of you just talked about that. Leah, what are some of the other ways, some of the other drivers of expanding relationships and expanding spend from existing customers?
Yeah, so I think that this kind of goes hand in hand with the same approach that you do to reduce churn. It's getting to really get into the DNA and understand your customers. I think it's also a big part of it is taking that feedback. I think a mistake that I've seen made, and I'm sure I've made myself in leading CS teams, is you get the feedback, you get the data, but then you're not sharing it in a timely fashion with the product team and with the development team and just leadership overall, and your CSMs that are in the field having these conversations and collecting more data. So it's aggregating the feedback, and it's in a timely manner. Evangelizing for your customer back to your product lead, right? So, for example, with Ask Nicely, we, part of our product is the feedback. So we collect that feedback and we provide it. There's a daily log and activity of product requests or feature requests or challenges with the product, and getting that directly in the hands of the developers who, as you know, are working in the future. And so it's getting them to put something on the radar that's going to help most of your customers. And then it's also finding ways that you can align your future with the customers. And so to me, expansion isn't something that should happen in the moment. It's something that the customer is aware of. It's in your goals, right? Like it's in your business review where you're like, hey, in 90 days, let's do X, Y, and Z to get better results for you. And yes, that naturally is going to include, more dollar spend and more growth, but it's a win-win, and it's immediate return on investment that they're anticipating.
One other thing I'll add to that is the gathering the feedback, and this is what I think Ask Nicely does so well, and MindBody with what you're doing with your B2B business as well. I'm sure you're doing this, Annie, but you can't just gather it and then not do anything. If you do that, you're way worse off than if you hadn't even asked in the first place, no matter how nicely you ask, if you will. And that's, I think, the really critical aspect of this is not only listening, but creating action and then demonstrating those actions back to your customer base to say, we hear you, and here's what we're doing to make changes, whether those are bug fixes or feature requests or something that we're adding to the roadmap, et cetera. But if you don't do that, you can drastically negatively affect your customer sentiment, because they're not only going to not tell you in the future, they're also going to tell their friends that, they wasted my time, and you've done that sort of anti-value, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, not to sound like a broken record, but you have to understand the desired outcomes of your customers and connect them to your product. Growing revenue in an organization is an intense data-driven and process-driven event. One that I would argue doesn't sound a lot like sales, that data-driven and process-driven. You have to have the partnership with sales, of course, but, we really think of customer success. Their role in expansion is nurturing and driving that relationship and increasing that product adoption. And they're really creating a nice runway for that customer to upgrade later. We do hand it over to our expansion sales team when they're ready actually to do that upgrade, but we're farming the leads for them, and we hold them accountable for that lead generation.
Excellent. So, you know what? Let's move on to our second poll question today. Love to hear from our audience whether your customer success program is currently designed to help customers in product adoption. Simple yes or no is perfect. Leah, while we wait for the audience to submit some of their answers, you talked a few minutes ago about how customer needs are changing as well. This concept of product adoption, new product adoption and introduction or upgrading customers really is necessary to help protect against churn as those customer needs change. So not always necessarily increasing revenue, but protecting, another way of protecting that existing revenue stream, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have a funny analogy on this of, it's kind of like joining a gym, and, a lot of people that join your organization, they join it, but if you're not watching it, if you're not training it, if you're not making sure they attend, which anybody that knows me is hilarious because I definitely have 2 gym memberships and don't. I should probably use MindBody for that, just a little plug there. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's just being the CSM to make sure that they're using the product, that they're continuously using it, right? Like, one of the things that we check on our CS side that's a key performance indicator is that customers are increasing their activity, not just staying stagnant, not decreasing it, but it's just making sure that people are accountable for what they signed up for.
Let's take a look and see what our audience is telling us about their programs. And overwhelmingly, they are including product adoption in their customer success strategies. So that's certainly some good news there. If we go back to the original study that we referenced earlier, we can see that 87% of teams, and again, that was a February 2018 study, so our numbers are slightly higher, which is, again, good, believe that customer success programs do help in product adoption. So now, Leah, you just talked about that a little bit. Aaron, you have thoughts on the fact that these numbers are extremely high?
No, I mean, it's not surprising to me, to be honest with you. And it is nice that it matches the poll that we just took. But, I think that this is sort of like reaffirming what we already knew. Frankly, I'm surprised that it's not 100% of customer success programs driving product adoption, because we know that's so intimately involved with the beginnings of customer success, going back to Annie's story at MindBody. And frankly, my personal story at a company called Foretel, I came in to reduce churn. That's so oftentimes that lagging indicator that she mentioned too. We have a churn problem. We better put a customer success program in place. Well, if you're going to do that, you know that churn reduction is related very closely with product adoption and engagement. If they're using you a lot, they're probably not going to leave you, barring some unforeseen circumstance. So, not really surprising. It's nice to see it kind of reaffirm what we believe in the industry. But I mean, frankly, I think it should be 100%. Maybe
I agree. I was surprised it wasn't higher. I know. I totally echo that, Aaron.
I'm openly biased here, dedicating my whole career to this customer success stuff, so understandable. Annie, what are your thoughts, though? Do you have any insights on that?
I think it's customer success is taking over. I mean, thanks to companies like Gainsight and their ginormous Pulse conference that they have now. But it is surprising, it's not. And I bet maybe a lot of those people who answered no, they believe that it should be, but it's not yet in their organization. They probably have some changes to make that happen.
Excellent, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about how to make it all work, how to make those strategies effective, how to make sure that that product adoption is where it is, and even increasing it. Leah, you spoke to some of these points or touched on some of these points earlier. Are there keys to it from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I think I'm going to start with the last bullet point on this slide, actually, the proactive versus reactive. There's not a perfect blueprint to expansion and product visibility and all of these. It's different at every organization. But I think the key is, again, to just aggressively have a gauge on the temperature of all of your customer base, and then being able to hyper-focus on each customer in the right time and use tools, and whether it's MPS or all the CS software out there, but using things I think is important, not only to reduce churn, but also to see where customers, one of my favorite things to see is that customers have outgrown the platform that they're on or the plan that they chose, and that they're, that means their business is successful. And so it's not being afraid to have those conversations with your customer. And to do that, you have to understand it, because where it does become cloudy, where it does become dangerous, is when you're just looking at a number and you don't understand the customer story, you don't understand how they're growing and what they need, and you're just getting in there and being another salesperson and just being, and again, no offense to sales, but just being another person that's got a number objective. So what I like to do is I like to tie everything in, again, to goals. So get the customer sentiment, understand their NPS score, have a business review where you go over the past 90 days and you have a plan for the future 90 days, and that should include expansion. Have that conversation. Hey, I want to expand you into, the next tier of our product, or I want you to adopt X, Y, and Z from our products because it'll help your business in this area. And if you mean it, if you really understand their business, it's not an uncomfortable conversation. It's a natural conversation.
I just want to jump in this one on that last slide real quick. I just have one quick point. We want to be conscious of time, but our customer success team, can you go back to that? There it is. Okay. Our customer success team at MindBody really started, to improve the product adoption. And I completely forgot my point, and that's why I'm rambling. So let's go ahead. I'm sure it'll come back to me at some point.
Great, thank you.
Sorry.
So we touched on advocacy a little bit earlier. Let's jump ahead and talk a little bit about that. One of the newer topics when it comes to customer success strategies, but certainly something that I think everybody's familiar with. We all place value on feedback from our friends, our family, our colleagues, and I'd be willing to bet that we've all made many decisions based on that kind of feedback at one time or another. We frequently ask people specifically for suggestions on products, services that we're looking to purchase, either for personal or for business use. So again, in the interest of time, let's jump to our next poll question, and then Leah, I'd love to hear from you on on some of the things that are important when it comes to advocacy programs. But let's first ask our audience whether you all currently have an advocacy program in the works as part of your strategy already. Again, yes or no. And so, Leah, while we wait for our audience to answer, what's important for people to understand about advocacy?
I think there's a lot of things that go into advocacy, and it's becoming, my personal opinion, expansion, we're all kind of catching up to have these best practices, but advocacy is still this really open, gray area of what it means for each person. And I think the first thing you have to do is understand and define your ideal advocate profile. So it's make a profile, be a little bit of a detective on that, and just kind of have your wall of what you would like to achieve as an organization. And then always tie that back into how the customer can benefit from that as well, right? So it could be, it's really just making sure the teams have this top-line growth mindset, right? And that you're playing offense versus defense, you're getting in there and you're helping your customers to have so much success with your product that they are a success story in themselves that you can share. And then timing, of course, is everything. Just like expansion, you don't just go after and take and ask. You have to make sure it's a good time for your customer to be an advocate as well.
Yeah, then find a way to help them, right? Make them look good in their world. Provide them a platform to be a thought leader in their own space. And now you're helping them get promoted and them grow their business and them be successful. And they're helping you through those advocacy channels and bringing in the net new customers. I think that's the real trick with this advocacy piece that, to Leah's point, we're still figuring it out in the industry. But how do you create advocates without monetizing them or incentivizing them somehow with a gift card or whatever? You don't want to do that. You want them to do it because they want to do it. And one way to do that is to provide them that platform, put them in, if they want to be in a public light as a thought leader in their space, give them an opportunity to do so.
Let's take a look at what our audience is doing currently with regards to advocacy programs, and we've got an almost even split down the middle. Slightly more people don't, but it's pretty much even.
I'm actually totally not. I'm actually surprised to see how many yeses there are on that. But it's not to the tipping point, right? One of our favorite terms in CS world and marketing, in my opinion. Annie, what do you think?
Just thinking about our own journey at MindBody, advocacy programs are difficult to launch and to keep going, right? It really is a top-down initiative. It's a voice of the customer program that requires not just customer success to own and operate it, but all parts of the organization to understand, whether it's NPS or a different metric, that this is our metric. We are accountable to doing this. So I think it's one of those things that organizations have trouble with because of the buy-in.
think that stat right there speaks to that. 5% of customers are engaged through referral programs, loyalty programs, et cetera. I think we're just figuring it out. When you get it right, though, your acquisition cost is, 1/10, and so you're profitable on that lifetime value much, much sooner. It's sort of the holy grail, right? Anytime you can have them bring you a customer that you didn't have to actively pay to market to at the top of your funnel, you've shortcutted your sales cycle, you've got a warmer lead, you close higher rates, everybody wins. But if it was easy, everybody would be doing it, and it's definitely not.
So while we're on the topic of advocacy, we do have a question from our audience specifically regarding metrics or indicators as far as tracking or understanding the success of advocacy. Are there particular metrics that that any of you would recommend?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here for.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Leah.
Go for it, Annie. Go for it.
I was just going to, we've measured NPS since about 2011, and it's been a love-hate, on-off relationship. But at the end of the day, it's a metric that you can easily benchmark, that you can, share with the board. It's simple enough for the organization to understand. It, of course, has its limitations. It's one component of the Voice of the Customer program or an advocacy program, but it is a good one, and so we lean towards that. Love it. And hate it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And no, I love it. I figured this is the fun part, right, Andy? This is where we get to talk about the customers being happy. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think also, it's growth and valuation, right? So if you get a net promoter score and you have a promoter, like somebody who's a 10, somebody who's happy, they're obviously going to be more likely and want to be an advocate. I think it's, it's looking at the lifetime value. Like, have they seen massive success in your program where they can evangelize it, where they're not just making up, some statistics to go with some case study that doesn't align. And really it's my favorite, flywheel marketing, right? Like, it's creating this virtuous cycle where you're leveraging existing customers to acquire new customers, which is this win-win-win wheel of, striking while the iron's hot, but on both sides. It's hot for you, it's hot for the customer, and then the end results of those could be success stories, they could be case studies, I mean, they could even be webinars, right? But where you can showcase yourself and the customer can as well.
Yeah, for us at MPS, it's really in the closed loop, and that is, it's promoters, it's detractors, it's passives. I mean, if someone says they're going to recommend your company, follow up and close the loop and ask them to actually carry through and do that. And that's, we use, of course, Ask Nicely, and we love that feature.
Great, thank you. Let's move along to how all of these things that we've talked about so far impact how your customer success teams have been created, how they've been built, and how that's changed and evolved since over the years. A lot of things to consider here. Multiplier effects for growth, metrics and KPIs, even beyond some of the things that you've just mentioned, and certainly new roles, new responsibilities, new job functions that come along with all of this stuff. Leah, where do teams start?
No, great question, right? And again, it goes to that there's not a perfect blueprint. So my advice to anyone who's a CS leader joining a new company, before come in with your bag of tricks and ideas, but also take a minute to really absorb your new role and your new customers. And then for the team, I think it's creating these journeys with key performance indicators sprinkled throughout that match with your customers. So it could be increased activity, looking at increased activity over month or quarterly, depending on how your business is set up. It's looking at, adoption, but really a key KPI for me and my team is, how many advocates can we grow from this? Because if you've got an advocate, you've done everything right? If someone is singing your praises, you've done everything right. And so the main metric I would advise people to start with is actually the advocacy, which you can see by the results and things is actually usually one of the last ones. That's my side. I'm sure Aaron and Annie have a lot more to say on that.
Yeah, it is interesting that, the and maybe it's the advocacy is kind of on the trailing end of all of this because it's frankly kind of one of the newer components to a customer success program. Going back to our original point, we started with reducing churn, and now we're talking about how to get new customers from our customers. So account-based marketing, customer marketing departments, those strategies of how do you, again, create that platform for the advocate. I love the idea. If you're going to come in and build a CS org from scratch, in fact, I wish I would have done this, start with some advocates. Go find your best customers and figure out what makes them your best customers and start working with your leadership to identify how do you get more of them, right? And then you can go back into the ones that are maybe the yellows and the reds. And until you understand why the greens are green, you don't know what to do with the rest. So that would be my little insight on that.
I agree, Aaron. That's exactly what we had done as well. I think, overall, what I love about this is there's so many revenue KPIs here, and as customer success leaders, we have to learn to talk this way. We have to learn to communicate the value of what we're doing to the measurements that matter to business, that matter to your CEO, to your CFO. Connecting what you're doing to the revenue will help to overcome the doubts that a lot of these executives have around service leadership and their ability to own the expansion and renewal process at the company. I mean, after all, great service and customer success programs will retain revenue. It'll create opportunities to grow revenue. It'll increase advocacy, which of course lowers your cost of sales. All of these things are on here, and we have to learn to talk this way regularly with our executive team if we want to see it take off in our organization.
Totally, yeah. If you want to have a seat at the revenue table, you better be able to speak to revenue and and how we directly affect that. I totally agree.
Yeah, I mentioned one of the things that comes along with all of this is new roles, new job functions within CS teams. So let's find out from our audience. One last poll question, and you can select any and all of these that currently apply to your CS teams. Which of these roles does your CS team not have? Just want to be clear, which ones do you not have in your CS teams? Customer success operations, customer marketing, solutions consulting, sales engineering, professional services, onboarding, and implementation. And then going back to, new roles, new responsibilities that have been created. Leah, are there specific job functions or new roles that you see as being critical to the success of these CS teams?
A big part of this is really around the complexity of your product. So, that's such a key indicator on what you should and shouldn't have. So, for example, with Ask Nicely, we've designed our product where the implementation of it doesn't take a developer, right? Like it's something we can go in and help coach our customers getting up and running very quickly. So for us, it's not as crucial to have the separation of onboarding and customer success management. As we grow, we continue to monitor that. But it's same thing with I think that depending on the size of your company too, right? Like with a successful startup, you're looking at things like multiple hats. But I'd love to hear maybe Annie from a larger company perspective.
We have all of these functions now. When we were growing, even in our post-IPO period, we didn't really have a strong customer marketing team. Solutions consulting wasn't there. It was really the launch of customer success that helped us to see how we needed to work better to engage existing customers to drive revenue. And we developed the customer marketing from there. And we started offering consulting programs and more education and leveraging, even in the marketing for land, more of these nurture and these educational resources so that we could be sure to get our target customer in the future. So, of these, we've built them over time. I kind of feel like organizations are like a twin size or a queen size bed, and you have a twin-size mattress where you're always kind of fighting for these valuable resources. But over time, if you're looking at the right things, I think they evolve and they're in the right way. That's kind of vague, but I hope that's somewhat helpful.
As far as what our audience is telling, we've got a little bit of everything as far as what their teams do not currently have on their in their customer success organizations or teams. But the largest ones that are absent currently, sales engineering and professional services, with customer marketing coming in a little bit beyond that. Leah, is that because some of those roles may be part of other parts of the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there is, more and more organizations are creating these customized roles. I can see someone here that would be, just a joy to have on the team. It would be super helpful, and as we grow, we'll get those. But I'm really excited to see customer marketing be higher on there. I'm not surprised by many of these. Sales engineering, I'm kind of surprised by that one. It just seems to be more and more organizations adding that. But again, it's where does that sit? I've seen sales engineering sit on customer success. I've seen it sit on sales. I've seen it even sit on product or development. So that might be part of some of these numbers too, is just that they don't sit on the customer success function.
Aaron or Annie, do you have thoughts based on your experience as well, as far as some of these that may or may not be more critical, and why sales engineering and professional services may be lagging a little bit?
On the sales engineering.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Aaron. So on the sales engineering side, this is something that we've had to really create, I think, as a result of focusing on our target customer. And as I said earlier, the implementation of customer success caused us to look at who is the right customer. And what we have now is really a great alignment with sales and marketing to say this is our target customer. We're not going to onboard people who aren't. But we had to show the data. We had to be at that table driving the organization forward in this and being part of that conversation. I'm a little surprised professional services isn't up there. There's so much creativity and things that you could be providing your customer beyond your core product to really complement what you're offering. And, of course, onboarding and implementation is so critical to reducing that early churn. So I wish that one was a little bit higher.
Yep. I think, I think it's not high because it's what do you CS teams not have? So I think that actually is a good thing that it's a low number because it means most CS teams have an onboarding and implementation specialist.
Right.
But looking at the customer success operations one, I love that. That's starting to crop up. And where I see the real value of that is the opportunity cost. So if you have an operations role, you can have one person at an entry-level position supporting a team of customer success managers with the QBR preparations and the health scoring data input and the data hygiene in Salesforce or whatever CRM you're using, and actionable insights out of Ask Nicely and your customer feedback loops and kind of doing all of that legwork, if you will. And now that takes it off of the CSM's plate. And generally speaking, the CSM is going to be more customer facing. They're going to be a bit later in their career or at least a higher level of experience. And so you've taken that and moved the cost of the operations from a higher salaried person on your team and put it on someone that is newer to the team. And then that opens up the opportunity for them to spend more time at the CSM level being proactive and doing the the soft skill account management duties of the job, not preparing decks and putting in health scoring data and whatever else we have to do to try to be leading in our indicators. So I would actually see that one. I'm pleased to see that it's only 22%. I'm frankly surprised, and because it's just kind of becoming a thing in the industry. But I think it's a great move. There's a couple companies in Denver who are doing it really successfully, and they have seen insane amounts of productivity on the CS side to drive the advocates and the expansion and the revenue.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I would also add, another thing you can do here if you're not to the point where you can hire each of these roles is if you hire a diverse team that each has a different skill set, which is always a goal of mine, like, I have my customer success management team. I have someone who does operations as well as handles strategic accounts. I have someone who's more marketing focused. I have someone who has the sales background, right, and is great with relationships but can help coach on expansion, et cetera. So I think, again, you can till you get to the point where you have the budget to, or even in our case, where it makes sense to have that many people, you can have kind of this hybrid role within customer success management, which, being a CSM myself back in the day, I love to have things that I was passionate about. So it kind of helps keep the job fresh.
Awesome. Thank you. We are running a little bit short on time, but we do have some questions coming in from our audience. And to our folks in the audience, if there are questions that we're not able to get to live, every single one of those will have been archived, and I know the team at Ask Nicely will get back to you and respond to every single one that we aren't able to get to during our live session. But we're in a period right now where we're seeing tons and tons of new companies starting up who may be experiencing situations where sales teams may be sending leads or customers who might not have a real fit to their product. Are there ways to build a process to ensure that that doesn't continue to happen moving forward? And I guess there's maybe two sides to that. Is one from a current product perspective, to try to make sure that you're targeting the right customers, but also from a future product expansion perspective, how do you make sure you keep relationships with those people who may have a fit to a later product or future product?
Yeah, I think Annie kind of touched on a bit of her story, getting to the table and kind of creating alignment there at MindBody. And maybe I misunderstood, but not to put you on the spot, Annie, I think you have some pretty good insights on that.
Yeah, I mean, I figured out who my target audience was. Who do I need the buy-in from? And it really was, for me, the CFO and the CEO. And so I sat down with some of our analysts, and I said, okay, let's create a revenue waterfall chart. Let's show what our revenue is, what we retain, and what we increase, because every earnings call we're talking about dollar-based net expansion, and investors are starting to back into those numbers to figure out, well, what is your churn, right? So learning what mattered to the people that I needed to influence to create these important roles, and presenting my case to them increased my influence dramatically. So actually getting up there as a customer service person and saying, here is our revenue retention, I mean, it just blew people's mind. It ended up being used at our board of directors and is just a core part of how we look at the data in the organization today.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, it's the big thing is speaking up and saying, it's being humble that you might not fit every single customer's need at that time, and so making sure that the company, from a top-down level, understands that let's make sure we make sense for the customer. And you're always going to get some that come through where maybe they have changed. And again, I think it's just staying actively involved with the customer at that point to stay on track with what they're trying to do, and to realize that sometimes you have to say not only can we not do that, but we don't make sense for you, and that's really hard for customers to do. But I think for companies, but I think it's important.
Fantastic. Thank you to all of you. That actually does take us a little bit over the time that we had allotted for today's session. I know I've been watching a few other questions come in, as you guys have been just talking, so I'm sure those folks will be looking forward to catching up after today's event. And if anybody has questions that come up later, if you want to follow up with the team from Ask Nicely or get more information on some of these topics, contact information, as well as details on the archived version of today's event will all be in your inboxes tomorrow. I do want to thank everybody in our audience for spending some time with us today. Hopefully it was as insightful as for you as it was for me, and a fantastic job. Thank you to all of our panelists, including Leah Cheney from Ask Nicely, Annie Wu from MindBody Inc. and Aaron Thompson from Success Hacker. Some phenomenal insight that hopefully all of our attendees will be able to take back to their companies and will help them implement their own CS strategies. So with that, we are out of time. Thank you, and I hope everybody has an absolutely fantastic afternoon.